I never thought I'd be sitting here, watching her walk away with everything. Those were the words I couldn't get out of my head as I sat in the small, empty apartment I was now forced to call home. Sandra had taken everything. The house, the life we built together for over a decade, and worse yet, she had done it with a smile, as if I was the one who owed her something. The court didn't help either. I had signed the papers, thinking it was just a formality. She had played her cards so perfectly, convincing me that it was all in my best interest. But now, sitting here alone, the truth started to sting more than I cared to admit. I had spent years building a life with her, only to have it all ripped away in an instant. As I stared at the bare walls of the apartment, the reality of my situation hit me hard. Sandra was now the proud owner of our house, the one we had spent years turning into a home. It wasn't just property, it was a piece of everything we had shared. The laughter, the arguments, the quiet mornings with coffee. All of it had been erased. And all because she had manipulated her way into getting what she wanted. I didn't understand it at first. How could someone I had loved for so long do this to me? But as time passed, the truth started to surface. Sandra wasn't the woman I had thought she was. She had been playing a game from the beginning, using me, my emotions, and my family to get ahead. But now, I was done being the pawn in her game. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my life. I knew I had to do something. I had to find a way to take control of the situation, even if it meant going up against the woman I had once trusted. The first step was simple. I needed answers. And I wasn't going to stop until I had them. So, I started looking. I reached out to my old lawyer, a man who had been with me through all the ups and downs of my marriage. I needed to find out if there was something I had missed in the settlement. Perhaps a clause, an overlooked detail, or a piece of information that could help me get my life back. As the days passed, the pieces started to come together. I went through old documents, checked bank statements, and spoke to people who had been involved in our financial matters. Slowly but surely, I started to uncover things that didn't add up. Sandra had hidden more than just the house from me. She had been siphoning off money, making secret deals behind my back, and lying to the court. The deeper I dug, the more I realized that I had been taken for a fool. But this time, I wasn't going to sit back and let it happen again. I had learned from my mistakes. This was no longer about what I had lost. It was about what I was going to take back. The truth was out there, and I was going to find it, no matter what it took. It had been a week since the divorce papers were signed, but the weight of it all was still heavy on my shoulders. The empty apartment felt suffocating, a constant reminder of how everything had been taken from me. I kept replaying the events in my head, wondering where I went wrong, where I missed the signs. But the truth was, I didn't miss the signs, I ignored them. Sandra had been playing me for years, and I hadn't realized it until now. I should have known when she started pushing me out of important decisions, when she started making plans without consulting me, when she started hiding things from me. At first, I thought it was just her being busy, maybe a little too wrapped up in her own life. But now I knew better. Sandra had always been one step ahead, manipulating everything, making sure I never saw the bigger picture. And now, sitting in this small apartment with nothing but my thoughts, I knew I had to change things. I couldn't let her win, not like this. I needed to find out what had really happened, what she had done behind my back. The first step was simple. I needed to go over everything. Every document, every email, every transaction. I had to find a way to get the truth out, to prove that I wasn't just some passive victim in this whole mess. I called my lawyer, Thomas, the one who had helped me through some of the hardest times in our marriage. He was the one person I could trust, the one person who could help me make sense of everything. I met him in his office, the place where we had signed the initial divorce papers just a few weeks ago. He sat behind his desk, looking as calm and collected as ever, but I could see the concern in his eyes. He knew what had been going on. He'd seen the cracks in our marriage, even if I hadn't. "Ryan," he said, leaning forward, "I've gone over everything, and there's something I think you need to see." He handed me a stack of papers. I could tell right away that something was off. The documents were from a separate account I had no knowledge of. The account was under Sandra's name, but it was linked to our joint funds. Sandra was transferring money into this account for months, Thomas explained. The transactions were small at first, but they grew over time. And there's more. I found evidence of property sales, Ryan. She sold several pieces of property you didn't even know about. My heart sank as I flipped through the papers. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Sandra had been siphoning off money from our joint accounts, selling assets, all while I thought everything was fine. The betrayal ran deeper than I could have imagined. I can't believe she did this, I whispered. I thought she was still the woman I married. How could she do this to me? Thomas placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. You were blinded by love, Ryan. It happens. But now we have the evidence. We can take this to court. We can fight back. The anger inside me started to boil over, but I kept it in check. This wasn't about rage. It was about reclaiming what was mine, taking back control of my life. I couldn't let Sandra continue to manipulate me, continue to get away with this. I had to do whatever it took to make sure she faced the consequences of her actions. As I left Thomas's office, a new sense of purpose filled me. I wasn't going to let Sandra win. I was going to fight for what was rightfully mine, and I was going to make sure the truth came out. The battle wasn't over yet. It was just beginning. The days that followed felt like a blur. I spent hours combing through financial documents, contracts, and emails, trying to piece together the full picture of what Sandra had done. The more I uncovered, the angrier I became. The house, the savings, the investments, they were all slipping through my fingers, and it was clear now that Sandra had been planning this for months, maybe even longer. What had seemed like a clean, straightforward divorce had been a well-executed scheme to strip me of everything. I couldn't help but feel a sense of betrayal like I had never known before. All those years, all that trust, and this was what it came to. But I was no longer the man who had let this happen. I had the evidence, I had the knowledge, and now I just had to act. I called Thomas again, setting up a meeting. This time, I wasn't asking for advice. I was ready to take action. Ryan, I think we have a solid case, he said when I arrived at his office. But we need to move quickly. Sandra will be preparing her defense right now, and we need to stay ahead of her. The words hit me with a mix of relief and dread. We were finally taking the fight to her. But as I sat there, listening to Thomas explain the next steps, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story. Sandra's actions seemed calculated, yes, but they also seemed desperate. Why would she go so far? Was there someone else involved? My mind raced with possibilities, each one more unsettling than the last. I wasn't just up against Sandra now. I was up against the consequences of years of manipulation and deceit. I spent the next few days preparing for the legal battle, meeting with Thomas, and gathering every piece of information I could. But the more I uncovered, the more I realized that Sandra's betrayal had affected more than just our finances. It had affected our family. I hadn't realized it at the time, but looking back, Sandra had systematically isolated me from the people I cared about most. Friends, family, they had all been pushed away. And when I started questioning her actions, she was already several steps ahead, preparing to cut me off completely. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It wasn't even about the money. It was about taking back my life, my relationships, and my future. The day of the court hearing finally arrived. I felt a strange calm as I walked into the courtroom, though the weight of everything that had happened pressed heavily on me. Sandra was sitting on the other side of the room, looking as composed as ever, but I knew better now. I knew the truth, and I was ready to make sure she knew I knew it too. As the judge called the hearing to order, I sat back and listened as Sandra's lawyer made his opening statement. He was smooth, well-prepared, and confident, but I wasn't intimidated. Not anymore. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up and walked to the stand, keeping my eyes locked on Sandra. Your Honor, I began, my voice steady. I am here today not just to fight for what's mine, but to reclaim the respect and dignity I was robbed of in this divorce. Sandra has hidden things from me, manipulated me, and taken advantage of my trust. But I am not here to make empty accusations. I have the evidence to prove everything she's done. I could see Sandra's expression shift slightly. It was just a flicker, but it was enough. She knew I had her. As I presented the documents, the transactions, the hidden accounts, everything that Sandra had thought she could get away with, the courtroom grew silent. The truth was coming out. I could feel it in the air. Sandra's defense quickly crumbled as the evidence stacked up against her. She tried to deflect, to deny, but the facts spoke for themselves. When the hearing was over, the judge ruled in my favor. I had won. It wasn't just the house or the money I had fought for. It was my integrity, my sense of self-worth. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt a strange sense of peace. The battle wasn't over. There would be more to come, no doubt. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control again. The weeks that followed the court hearing were a strange mix of triumph and uncertainty. Sandra's defeat was a victory I had never thought I would see, but it didn't feel like the end. In some ways, it felt like the beginning of something new. The house was still in my name, and I had been awarded a substantial settlement to cover the damages, but there was still the lingering question of what came next. I had spent years building a life with Sandra, and now I had to rebuild it all over again. The apartment I was living in, while functional, felt empty. It wasn't a home. It was just a place to sleep, a place to exist. But it was mine, and that gave me a small sense of comfort. I started making changes, small ones at first. I replaced the old furniture that reminded me too much of the past. I painted the walls a neutral gray, something clean, something simple. I didn't want to keep anything from my old life, not if it meant constantly looking back. Every morning, I woke up early and started my day the same way. A cup of coffee, a quick scan of the news, and then I'd get to work. But the work was different now. I had started my own small consulting business, something I'd been putting off for years. I had always dreamed of doing it, but it had always felt like there was never the right time. Now, there was nothing holding me back. I had a new focus, a new purpose. I spent hours on the phone, sending emails, working through plans and proposals. The more I dove into the work, the more I realized that I was building something for myself, something that didn't rely on anyone else. It was empowering. Slowly, my life began to take shape again. I reconnected with old friends, people I had lost touch with over the years. Some of them had been there for me during the early days of my marriage, and they had seen the changes in me. They knew I had always been someone who liked to keep the peace, to make sure everyone was happy. But now, I was different. I had learned to put myself first, to stop worrying about how everyone else felt. I found myself spending more time with my parents. It was something I had neglected over the years, but now, it was something I wanted. I made an effort to visit them more often, to call them just to check in. My father was getting older, and I knew I didn't have much time left with him. One afternoon, as I was leaving their house, I stopped to talk to my mom. She looked at me and smiled. "I can see the change in you," she said. "It's like you're finally finding yourself again." Her words stuck with me. I hadn't realized how much I had lost myself in the years of being with Sandra. I had always put her needs ahead of mine, always made sure she was happy. But now, for the first time in years, I was learning to be happy on my own. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I was starting to believe that I could handle whatever came my way. The past had tried to break me, but I wasn't broken. I was stronger than I ever thought I could be. The journey wasn't easy, and there were days when I wondered if I had made the right decisions. But each day that passed, I knew more and more that I was doing the right thing. I had to be patient, to trust that the future would work itself out. And slowly, I began to trust myself again. It had been months since the court ruling, and while I had reclaimed some of what was mine, there were still times when the weight of the past felt unbearable. The victory was bittersweet. Yes, I had my house back, and yes, the settlement was fair, but the emotional toll of the entire ordeal lingered. I had been betrayed by the person I had trusted most, and that kind of pain didn't disappear overnight. Still, I was moving forward. My consulting business was thriving, and the work I was doing for myself felt more fulfilling than anything I had experienced before. It was mine, completely mine, and that sense of independence had become my anchor. But there were moments, in the quiet of the night, when the loneliness crept in. It wasn't the absence of Sandra that bothered me. It was the emptiness that followed the end of something that had once meant so much. I missed the life we had built, the dreams we had shared, even if those dreams had been based on lies. As I sat at my desk one evening, staring at the plans for a new project, I received a call from an unexpected number. My heart skipped a beat as I saw the name on the screen. It was Sandra. For a brief moment, I hesitated. What could she possibly want after everything that had happened? But I picked up the phone, curious despite myself. "Ryan," she said, her voice sounding tired, almost broken. "I know we haven't spoken in a long time, but there's something I need to tell you." I leaned back in my chair, bracing myself for whatever came next. "Go ahead," I said, my voice steady. "What is it?" There was a long pause before she spoke again, and I could hear the hesitation in her words. "I've made some mistakes, Ryan. I know I hurt you. I didn't realize what I was doing until it was too late, and now I don't know how to fix it." I was taken aback by her tone. For the first time, Sandra sounded vulnerable, like she wasn't the confident, manipulative woman I had known for so long. I wasn't sure what to say. Part of me wanted to lash out, to tell her everything I had been holding in since the divorce, but another part of me, one that was still searching for closure, wanted to listen. Sandra, I don't know what you expect me to say, I replied, my voice softer than I had intended. You can't just undo everything that happened. I know, she said quickly. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect you to want to talk to me, but I need you to understand that I regret everything. The lies, the manipulation, the way I treated you. It wasn't right. I could hear the sincerity in her voice, but the bitterness inside me was hard to ignore. The years of resentment, the betrayal, it was still there, buried deep. What do you want from me, Sandra? I asked, my patience thinning. I just want you to know that I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking. And if there's any chance that we could start over, even as friends, I'd like to try. I sat in silence, my mind racing. Was this the apology I had been waiting for? Did I even want it? For a moment, I thought about the person I used to be, the one who wanted to fix everything, to heal the wounds. But I wasn't that person anymore. I had learned to protect myself, to put myself first. I don't know, Sandra, I finally said. I'm not sure I can ever forgive you for what you did, but I don't think I need to. I've moved on, and I think it's better if we both keep our distance. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I understand, she said quietly. I just wanted you to know. I'm sorry. Goodbye, Sandra, I said, the finality of the words hanging heavy between us. I hung up the phone and sat back in my chair, feeling a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. I wasn't sure if I had made the right decision, but I knew one thing for certain. I had taken control. I had learned to let go of the past, and that was the first step toward truly moving forward. The days following the phone call with Sandra felt surreal. I had made my decision, and while I knew it was the right one, there was a lingering sense of uncertainty. The idea of letting go completely of what had once been such an important part of my life wasn't easy, even though I had finally accepted the reality of who Sandra had become. The house was mine again, but the weight of it felt heavier than ever. It wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was everything that came with it. Memories, regrets, and the realization that so much of it had been built on lies. I spent the next few weeks making subtle changes. I rearranged the furniture, moving things into places that felt more natural, more comfortable for me. I even started decorating, choosing pieces that made me feel at home, pieces that reflected who I was now, not who I used to be. It was a quiet process, almost therapeutic, as if I were reclaiming the space, not just physically but emotionally. Still, the silence in the house was deafening at times. It was strange to be in a place that had once been shared, a place that was supposed to be filled with life and laughter, now feeling empty and hollow. But I was learning to adjust. I had to. Life had changed, and I couldn't afford to dwell on the past anymore. I focused on my business, throwing myself into work the way I had once thrown myself into the marriage. It wasn't just a distraction. It was something that gave me purpose. My clients were happy, and my schedule was full. For the first time in a long time, I was in control of my own success. But as fulfilling as work was, there were still moments when I found myself wondering if I had done the right thing. Was walking away from Sandra the best choice? Was I closing a chapter one shouldn't have? I couldn't help but reflect on the good times we had. There had been laughter, love, and connection, but it was always overshadowed by the lies, the manipulations, the way she had used me for her own gain. And now that the truth was out, I understood that I had to stop romanticizing what was no longer real. A few weeks after the court hearing, I received a letter from Sandra. I knew I had to read it, even though a part of me didn't want to. The letter was short, but to the point. Ryan, I hope you're doing well. I've had time to reflect on everything, and I realize now how much I hurt you. I'm truly sorry for everything. I hope you find happiness in your life moving forward. Take care. It was the closure I hadn't even known I needed. Sandra's apology was brief, but it was enough. I didn't need her to apologize to move on, but seeing her acknowledge the hurt she had caused helped me release the final remnants of anger and resentment. I didn't forgive her, not yet, but I was ready to move on. I set the letter aside, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I wasn't going to let Sandra or my past define who I was anymore. I had started a new chapter in my life, one that was mine and mine alone. The weight that had burdened me for so long was starting to lift, and with it came a sense of freedom. The house, once a symbol of everything I had lost, was now just a home, a place for me to rebuild. I wasn't going to let the past dictate my future. It was time to live for myself, to embrace the life I had built on my own terms. It had been months since Sandra's letter, and the calm that followed her words had settled in a way I hadn't expected. I had been ready for the anger to resurface, for the resentment to claw its way back into my heart, but it didn't. Instead, there was something else, a sense of liberation. The weight that had been suffocating me for so long was finally lifting, and I realized I was breathing easier. I had given up so much of myself over the years, trying to keep everything intact for Sandra, for the life we were supposed to have. But now, for the first time in a long time, I was making choices for myself. The apartment I had moved into had started to feel more like home. It was modest, but it was mine. The walls, bare at first, were now filled with things that reflected who I had become. Paintings, books, and little trinkets that told the story of my new life. There was no longer any room for reminders of my past with Sandra. I spent the days growing my business, working harder than I ever had before. It wasn't just about the money. It was about proving to myself that I was capable of standing on my own. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. But even with all the progress, there were still moments when the loneliness crept in. It wasn't as overwhelming as before, but it was there. I had become so accustomed to the constant presence of Sandra in my life that sometimes I caught myself expecting her to walk through the door or to hear her voice on the other end of the phone. It was a strange feeling, like a habit that had been broken, but the remnants still lingered. One evening, as I was working late on a project, I received another unexpected call. It was from my son, Lucas. I hadn't heard from him in a while, and I wasn't sure what to expect. "Hey, Dad," Lucas said, his voice warm but with a hint of hesitation. "How's everything going?" "It's going well," I replied, setting my work aside for a moment. "Better than expected, actually. What about you?" "I'm good," he said, but there was something in his tone that made me pause. "Listen, I've been meaning to talk to you about something." I sat up straighter, wondering what was coming next. "What's on your mind?" I've been thinking a lot lately," he started, "about everything that happened with you and Mom. I know things got complicated, and I know I wasn't exactly there when you needed me. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." The words hit me harder than I expected. I had always known that Lucas had been caught in the middle of everything, but hearing him apologize felt like a weight had been lifted from both of us. "You don't need to apologize," I said, my voice tight. "I know it wasn't easy for you. You were just a kid when everything fell apart." "I know," he said softly, "but I think I could have handled it better. I didn't understand what was going on at the time, but I do now." His words felt like the final piece of the puzzle, the closure I didn't even realize I had been searching for. I hadn't expected Lucas to feel that way, but hearing him say it made everything feel more real. "It's okay, Lucas," I said, my voice a little softer. "We both did the best we could, and we're both moving forward, right?" "Right," he said with a chuckle. "I just wanted you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what." We talked for a while longer, catching up on life, and by the time we hung up, I realized something. I wasn't alone. I hadn't been alone all along. I had a son who loved me, a business I was building, and a life that was mine to shape however I wanted. As the days went by, I found myself slowly letting go of the past, one memory at a time. It wasn't an overnight process, but I was learning to accept it all, the good, the bad, the hurt. And in doing so, I was finally learning how to forgive myself, to be okay with the fact that things hadn't gone as planned. Life wasn't about holding on to what was lost. It was about building something new. And that's exactly what I was doing. The weeks that followed felt like a dream. It was hard to believe how much had changed in such a short amount of time. My relationship with Lucas had deepened, my business had grown, and most importantly, I had finally started feeling like myself again. But even with all the progress, I couldn't shake the sense that there was still something missing. It wasn't that I wanted to go back to the past, to the life I had with Sandra. That life was gone, and I had accepted that. But I realized that, in my pursuit of independence, I had isolated myself too much. I had thrown myself into work and personal growth, and while that was important, I had neglected the one thing that mattered most: connection. One afternoon, I found myself sitting at my desk, staring at the computer screen but not really seeing anything. My mind kept wandering to the same thought. Was I truly living, or was I just going through the motions? I had built a new life for myself. Yes, but I had forgotten what it meant to truly share it with someone. That's when I got the call. It was from an old friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Her name was Rachel, and she had been one of my closest friends before everything with Sandra had consumed my life. "Ryan, it's Rachel." Her voice came through the phone, warm and familiar. "I know it's been a while, but I've been thinking about you." "Hey, Rachel," I said, smiling at the sound of her voice. "It's good to hear from you. How have you been?" "Really been?" she asked, her tone gentle. "I know we lost touch, but I've been following your progress. I'm proud of what you've accomplished." "Thanks, Rachel," I replied, feeling a mix of emotions. "It's been a lot, but I'm getting there. It's a new chapter, you know." "I can imagine," she said, "and I'm glad to hear it. But I also know that you've been carrying a lot on your own. You don't have to do that, Ryan." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't realized just how much I had been isolating myself. I had surrounded myself with work and personal achievements, but I hadn't allowed myself to be vulnerable. "You're right," I admitted, my voice softer. "I've been so focused on moving forward that I forgot to reconnect with the people who matter." "It's not too late, Ryan," Rachel said with a knowing laugh. "You don't have to carry everything alone, and you don't have to be perfect either. You've been through a lot, and it's okay to need others." We talked for a while longer, catching up on everything that had happened in our lives. By the end of the conversation, I felt a sense of relief. It was as if a weight had been lifted, a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying. Rachel had always been someone who could bring perspective to any situation, and her words reminded me that life wasn't about doing everything alone. It was about sharing the journey with the people you trust, the people who truly care about you. After the call, I sat back in my chair, taking a deep breath. I realized that, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just focused on building my future. I was thinking about the people I wanted to be part of it. And that included Lucas, my friends, and even myself. I needed to find balance, to make room for both success and connection. The following week, I made plans to meet with Rachel. It wasn't just about rekindling an old friendship. It was about reminding myself that life was meant to be shared. As I looked ahead, I knew that the road to healing wasn't just about moving forward. It was about finding peace in the connections I had, the people who had always been there for me, and the ones who would continue to walk with me in this new chapter. It was time to stop isolating myself and start living with intention, to embrace the future, but also to let others in. And with that, I felt ready for whatever came next. As the weeks passed, I found myself settling into a new rhythm. The business continued to grow, and while I had days where the loneliness crept in, I started filling my time with things that brought me joy. I began attending local events, art exhibits, charity functions, even a cooking class or two. I was rediscovering a version of myself that had been buried for far too long. It was strange, almost surreal, to see the world through a new lens. The pain of the past, while still there, no longer consumed me. I had learned to live with it, to make peace with the choices I had made. One evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, I received another unexpected call. This time, it was from Lucas. "Dad, I've been thinking," he said, his voice serious. "I know you've been doing great, but I've been feeling like I should have been more present for you through all this. I never really realized how hard it must have been." I leaned against the kitchen counter, the warmth of the evening sun fading as I listened. "You don't need to apologize, Lucas," I said, my voice calm. "I know you were caught in the middle, and I never wanted to put that on you. You've always had your own life to live." "I know," he replied, "but I want you to know that I'm here for you. I've been thinking a lot about our family, and I just want to make sure we're okay." His words hit me in a way I hadn't expected. It wasn't about the divorce or the past. It was about the present. He was reaching out, showing me that he still cared, and that meant more than I could put into words. "We're okay, Lucas," I said, a small smile tugging at my lips. "We'll always be okay, as long as we keep moving forward." After the call ended, I found myself standing in the quiet of my kitchen, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: gratitude. It wasn't just for the things I had or the progress I'd made. It was for the people in my life who were still there, supporting me, no matter how much time had passed. The next few months brought more changes, but they were the kind of changes I welcomed. I started dating again, not in any rush, but casually, meeting people and enjoying the process of getting to know someone without the weight of expectations. I wasn't looking for a replacement for Sandra. I was looking for connection, for companionship, and for a reminder that life could still be beautiful. I even found myself laughing more, the kind of deep, carefree laughter I hadn't experienced in years. It was as if the heaviness had finally lifted, and I could breathe freely again. Then, one Saturday afternoon, Lucas invited me to dinner. When I arrived at his place, I was surprised to see Sandra there, sitting at the table with a glass of wine in her hand. I hesitated at the door, unsure of what to do, but Lucas, seeing the confusion in my eyes, smiled and waved me in. "It's okay, Dad," he said. I invited her. I thought it was time for all of us to sit down and talk. I wasn't sure how I felt about it. Sandra and I hadn't spoken much since the divorce, and the idea of sharing a meal together felt awkward, to say the least. But I could see the genuine effort in Lucas' eyes, the hope that perhaps this was a chance for some kind of reconciliation, even if it wasn't for me and Sandra, but for him. So I sat down, and for the first time in a long time, we all shared a meal together. The conversation was surprisingly calm, even pleasant at times. We didn't discuss the past or rehash old arguments. Instead, we talked about life, about the things we had all been doing, about our hopes, and about the things that mattered now. As the evening wore on, I realized that this was the closure I had needed all along. It wasn't about forgiving Sandra for what had happened. It was about accepting it and moving on. I didn't need her in my life the way I had once thought I did. But seeing her there, sitting across from me, no longer felt like an unresolved chapter. It felt like just another part of the journey. And for the first time, I felt at peace with that. Life had changed, and I had changed with it. The future was uncertain, but I no longer feared it. I was no longer looking back. I was finally ready to embrace the present and whatever came next. I smiled to myself as the conversation continued, knowing that I had taken the hardest steps to get here. And now, I was finally free.